As a practical matter, do we have any prospect of inflation? Because that really is what's encouraging, I think, the Fed, that they don't see any of that yet.
No, we haven't seen any yet, and they certainly have missed their target ever since they set their target, so that's a problem. And the question is this year, when they hit the reset on the new policy framework, will they have an average inflation time frame out there, something to give us more sense of how much they're willing to do catch-up policies and how hot they're really willing to overshoot on inflation if we can actually get it up there in the first place. And I think that's something that's very important this year. The Fed is counting on the fact that we get easier year-over-year comps in inflation going forward to make the inflation numbers look a little more solid, but it still is very fluid, especially with the blow to commodity prices tied to the coronavirus and the blow to China's economy, which is one of the biggest commodity consumers out there. So this is a tough environment for the Fed. It's good that they've done the cuts and they feel they've got a tailwind. It's not just the Fed. The Federal Reserve opened the door to almost 50 central banks cutting rates a collective of over 70 times simultaneously in 2019, which has given us a bit of a tailwind and a cushion against the blow from the coronavirus and any other shocks that we may see as we move into 2020.
Diane, why aren't we seeing the participation rate move up more? It has moved up some, but it's still, for example, if you compare it with other countries around the world, it isn't up the same level of that. Why aren't they? If we've got that tight a job market, why isn't it getting the participation rate up?
Well, the good news is that it's moved up, and that white men and Hispanic men are finally coming back after not being as much involved in the picture. Much of the movement up in recent years has been because women joining the labor force and coming back up to their previous highs of the 1990s. But men are still lagging the 90s boom by quite a bit. And we really lost that decade going into the Great Recession from 2000 to 2008. We lost a lot of ground. We know there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the most notable one is, everything from the trade situation to globalization to technological innovation, all of that suppressed participation. But also we saw the opioid crisis, we saw increased suicides, we saw increased deaths from alcohol-related illness. All of those things combined, the rural-urban divide, those things were still challenging. The good news is it looks like we're finally beginning to tap some of those people, and that's why we have more room to run. The Fed had underestimated the ability to pull those people in from the sidelines in what's become a marathon of an expansion out there. And I think their goal now is to sustain it. I think in order to get a little more adrenaline, a little more heat this year, they should cut again mid-year to keep the adrenaline going and on what has become a marathon and an expansion and get a little more heat.